every word with a speech you made in Stockholm this week, where you revealed for the first time that at 17 you had been aggressed. You had your own ugly, unpleasant Me Too moment. Tell me about it.
So there was a man in Lagos who was who I thought would help me with my first. I published a book of poetry, a terrible, terrible book that I hope nobody ever reads. But I was young and I thought it was a wonderful book. And so I thought the world should know about it. And so I wanted to do a book launch. And I went to this man's office and he was very nice, very helpful. I was sitting across his desk and he said he was so impressed because young people were not reading and I had written this book at 17. And then he got up and came round and very casually slipped his hand under my shirt, under my bra, and squeezed my breast.
Just like that?
Yes.
Did you even get a sense of foreboding when he got up and came around? No.
No, because nothing had prepared me for it. Nothing had, nothing in his behavior had suggested that he was going to do anything like that.
And you were 17?
Yes. Yes.
So how did that shape you? How did that turn you into the feminist you are today?
Do you know, I think I was a feminist before then. I've been a feminist for as long as I can remember, which is simply to say that as a child, I was very much aware that the world did not treat men and women the same way. Right?
Just like we heard from Sylvia Earle.
Yes. I didn't read any feminist texts. I didn't, I didn't have a moment when I rose up and said I am a feminist. Actually, I didn't know what the word feminist meant for a long time, but I was one. I was one.
And why did you decide to tell this story now, given that it's been 6 months or more since this whole revolution has started?
I think partly because and I'm not interested in naming names because that's not what it is for me. It's simply to say, this is happening. It happens to most women. It's not unusual. I don't think I'm remarkable. But I wanted to use it to talk about why we don't talk about it. Right, the thing about the social conditioning that women go through that makes them reluctant to talk about these experiences. That somebody will say, why are you talking about it now? Why didn't you do something? Why didn't you push him or slap him? And how our socialization teaches us to be nice and kind even to people who hurt us.
And you know, you do describe an internal change that happened to you after this. I mean, you know, all the women are asked, why didn't you? Why are you only telling us now? Why did you keep quiet? Why weren't you, etc., as you just said? But your whole body broke out, you described.
I broke out in rashes shortly after that, and all over my chest, my neck, my face. And I remember, and the only person who knew was my best friend, Uju. And I remember Uju saying to me, your body is saying what your lips cannot say. You know, sort of this loathing that you feel is... And I don't know if that's why I broke out. Maybe I was just using the wrong moisturizer.
Oh, stress can do that.
Yes. But the point is that even if the rashes had nothing to do with it, my spirit had a very visceral reaction to it.
Now, is this best friend the same one who told you that, or was it another friend, who told you that feminism is not part of our culture?
Oh, no, no. My best friend is too reasonable to say that.
But it was a friend who said that to you.
It was a friend who said that, and this friend meant well. And this is just a way of silencing women. Because, of course, the idea that feminism is part of any culture, or not part of any culture, is ridiculous. I think my great-grandmother was a feminist because she spoke her mind, wanted her own, to be her own, if that makes sense, and was known to be a troublemaker, which I think is a wonderful tag for a woman, which meant she was feminist. And for me, I don't really... so now sort of being this feminist icon, which is something I feel very ambivalent about, it was never the plan. But the kind of feminist discourse in the West, that, you know, when people talk about first-wave feminism, second-wave feminism, it doesn't really appeal to me. I don't really feel a connection to it because it's not my story. But I didn't become a feminist because I read about second-wave feminism. I became a feminist because I grew up in Nigeria and observed the world and just saw what felt to me like an injustice that made no sense. Why were women judged more harshly? Why were all the positions of real power occupied by men? Why were the cultural practices that had prestige somehow only for men? You know, those things just... It didn't seem to make any sense to me as a child.
You do, again, recount in one of your TED Talks an extraordinary story where you are with a male friend and you're in the car park or something and you want to give a tip to one of the workers there, and you give a tip, and what happens?
And this man to whom I gave the money, my money from my bag, he looks from
your hard work.
Yes, he looks across me and says to my friend, the man, "Thank you, sir." But here's the thing for me.
But that's stark.
It did stick, but it was a wonderful moment for my friend, because until then, he had often said to me, "I don't really understand what you mean when you say that there's a problem. I don't really understand." And he says to me, "Oh, women are equal. There's no problem. Women should stop complaining." And then that moment, he said to me, "Why did the man thank me? You gave him the money."
Do you have hope that this is actually on a tipping point? Are we on a curve that can only go in the right direction?
I think it could go either direction, yes. I hope it will go in the right direction. I mean, one of the reasons that I find Me Too hopeful is I think it's remarkable because it's the first time that women's stories are finally being believed. It's the first time that the impulse, the sort of cultural impulse is to believe women. It has never happened. And so that's why I'm hopeful. But I also know that the history of women's movements, the history really of any justice movement, is one in which there's always the possibility of
rolling back.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we see that with civil rights in the United States to an extent. You know, we're all wondering whether this amazing never again movement, the anti-gun movement by the young people in America will keep moving forward or will get marginalized. And then the same about race, obviously, particularly in the United States. Black Lives Matter and the seeming... It just seems that struggle never gets to the top of the mountain.
Yes.
And I know that you're always asked about it, and you've often said that you're tired sometimes of catering to white sensitivities and sensibilities about this issue. And sometimes you get yourself in trouble in various audiences because of that. But you're obviously saying something massively important. So where do you see the struggle over racism in your own environment, whether it's in the United States, even in Africa, if I could say so?
It's hard for me to talk about racism in Africa because it's really, the context is so different. I don't think of myself as black when I'm home in Nigeria because we have many problems, but race is not one of them. I think we have ethnicity and religion, which are really the things that divide us, I think. But in the US, which is a country that racism is at the sort of the genetic center of America. And because of that, I think it's going to take a long time. I mean, it took, 250 years of racism to create America. And since the Civil Rights Movement, which hasn't quite achieved what it's supposed to achieve, because you look at the US and you look, for example, at cities. And I remember when I first came to the US and I thought, why are the really terrible parts of the cities so full of black people? And ostensibly, it's because they don't work hard or they don't want to live. But that's not true. And you start to read the history and you realize that there were government policies that excluded African Americans. And I think what's happening now, I do think that Black Lives Matter has done remarkable work. I think that if we can measure progress in terms of what we can now say, I think Black Lives Matter has contributed a lot. There are many conversations that black people had in private that they're now having publicly in mixed audiences. That is progress.
Particularly 50 years after Martin Luther King's assassination. And as you mentioned, these reports, and we just reported on one that had been done by Stanford and a bunch of other scholarly areas where it sadly said that black boys, even if they're born into a wealthy family and they get all the educational opportunities that their white neighbors may have, right after school, they drop right off that precipice back into the pit of racism. I said you use your platform, your fame as an author to move these agendas along. Where are you right now in your writerly life? You've done, obviously, Americana was the last book, but what's happening next? Where do you feel that this writing and activism is going for you?
You know, I think they're two very different things. The person who writes fiction is very different from the person who sort of pontificates about things and thinks she knows a lot about these things. And I'm a writer. I really do think I was born to tell stories. I think of it as a gift from God, a gift from my ancestors. But talking about things that matter to me happened because I had this platform that came with my fiction writing. And there are many times I really just want to stay at home in my study and read poetry and write. That's what gives me the greatest joy. But then something happens and I can't help it because I get so angry about injustice that I feel like I need to say something. And So right now I'm trying to read more poetry. I'm also trying not to have the social issues that I care about be the things that propel my fiction writing. I want to tell the stories that speak to me. I want to write about love but again, even love is political.
It is indeed, and it just leads me on because Nigeria has this issue, Kenya has this issue of criminalizing homosexuality. Tomorrow I have an interview with the president of Kenya who told me some quite, it will be viewed as quite controversial, but they're Kenyan things about this issue, which is that then this is not an important issue for the people, is it? The idea of gay rights, of protection, of...
I think it's very important. And the reason is that to criminalize something that isn't criminal is immoral. And so we have gay Nigerians who live in fear. We have gay Nigerians who are threatened, who have violence committed against them. I know one in particular, for example, who says that he's sometimes blackmailed by his driver, his gate man, because the driver and the gate man, they say to him, oh, I'm going to go report and tell them that men come to your house, that you're gay. Yeah. It matters. It matters because the dignity of human beings, we need to uphold that. They're not doing anything criminal. I think people should be allowed to be who they are.
Well, Chimamanda, keep writing and keep agitating.